Welcome to the Connection Codes podcast. This is the podcast where we break open our emotions that take us from being disconnected to connected in ourselves and in our relationships. I am your host, Tara Wages, and I am here with clinical sexologist, marriage and family therapist, Dr. Glenn Hill. And I am here with his incredible wife, Phyllis Hill, who takes all of this information and helps us apply it to our lives. And together, they are the founders of the Connection Codes, which is the guide to human connection. Excited to be here.
Yeah. Hello, world.
Wow. We just got back a few hours ago from California.
Literally a few hours ago.
Yes, we flew that middle of the night flight, which that was rough. Rough, let me just say. But we had an amazing time in California and met so many wonderful people. And we even had a house event where some dear friends, the Giles, so shout out to Deborah and Daniel Giles.
Thank you, Deborah and Daniel.
Who had opened their home and invited just a ton of friends. I think there was at least 30 people crammed in. And it was amazing just to get to talk about connection codes and to teach just some fundamental tools on how to connect with each other, how to connect with our family members, our friends. And we love doing that. And, you know, I appreciated even you, Tira, because you put something on Instagram just saying, hey, if anybody in the local area, we live in Nashville, wants to do just an evening with us, we would love to come and talk to your friends about just these tools and how to take these things. And it's interesting because already the very next day we had feedback where people said, oh my word, we did this with our 5-year-old the next morning and it made all the difference. And, you know, just to hear that it can be that quick where you can see change is so encouraging. And so that's what we want is we want these tools to be simple and we want them to be implementable immediately so that you can see, wow, this really does work, which is so great.
And also you originally went out there to work with the Pursuit Co., a church out in Santa Rosa, California. And I think it's really cool because they actually went through one of our group packages. So they had done our master classes and then brought you out in person to learn from you, like, here, help me apply it even more. And I just think that's really cool to hear of a group wanting to go even deeper than the masterclass, than the podcast, and bring their community together. Because whether it's a group setting in a church or in someone's home, there's just something about building a community around you of people that like you can now talk to about this. Like we're all sharing the same language. Oh, you and your husband are struggling in conflict, but we've gone through this thing together. Now I can actually talk to y'all and you'll understand each other. You know, we can help each other's marriages grow when we're all speaking the same language.
And that makes it exponential as far as the power of it, because the systems we've set up for many centuries is that you go to your upper, you go to your, whether it's your pastor, your preacher, your elder, in religious settings, or even if it's a therapist, you go to this one person, but it's not a mutual relationship. And I am a therapist, so I can speak for us. And it's just a bad model because we need people, and I'm all for therapy. I think it's incredibly beneficial to a lot of people, but we need to live life together. That's when it becomes incredibly powerful. And it's so fun for us because we live life with so many connection coders who connection code with us, and we're just pilgrims on the journey. We're a little further down the trail than a lot of people, but whenever we're sitting with friends and they see that Phyllis and I missed each other, that they're able to go, hey, what just happened for you there? And of course I tell them, don't pull that connection code stuff on me. I'm the one that taught it to you. No, I don't do that.
Pretty sure you did that to me this morning between me and Wes. You were like, Satir, what's happening for you there?
But the reality is you and Wes do the exact same thing for us to go, so, so we're not in a hierarchy. We're not in a, whatever you call it, a superior position. We're just all pilgrims on the journey. And again, are some of us more, are further along in some things? Yes. But it's still just all the same. We're still just experiencing it the same.
What I also love.
What
What
did I do?
Nope, you're good. I think you just touched it. That happens sometimes. We just like touch our
Okay.
mic. But one of the things that I also love about creating a community of people around you that speak this language
Yes.
is it helps and it opens up for your vulnerability with each other. It allows you to have those people in your life that you can be truly authentic and yourself with, and you don't feel like you have to just show perfection all the time, because now you have a safe space to share. You know, you can come to your friend and be like, oh my gosh, I'm feeling a lot of shame about this. And they know how to meet you there, and you can be vulnerable. And so one of the stories that happened this last weekend at the event in California in Santa Rosa, Glenn, you had a vulnerable moment on stage that you shared something you don't typically share in group settings. So I want y'all to talk a little bit about that, and then what the outcome of that, what did that lead to in that moment of vulnerability?
Well, before you share, I do want to shout out. I'm so thankful you mentioned the Pursuit Church and just that they are the ones who brought us out to California. And so a shout out to Elijah and Christina Runyon. They just, and all of their staff, all of their close people, and they all listen to the podcast. So I want to be sure and shout out just the thanks for making it a magical trip, an event. They thought of every little detail and just, made it really a joy for us. I think that's one of the things I love when groups have us come out, whether it's a church or a business, is that we really want to pour into the people's lives, not just teach or not just, speak in front of the whole group.
Right.
We really want to connect while we're there and pour into the lives of the people who are open for that.
Cool.
So you want to talk about what?
So back to on stage.
Yeah, like what were we even talking about? Like how did we even get there? Do you remember that part?
I do not. We could go back and watch the video. I assume we were somehow talking about psychological disorders and
you were talking about joy not being bad, but like
so it wasn't
different parts
about
of joy.
It wasn't about psychological disorders. It was talking about the different emotions and that they're neither good nor bad.
Right.
And that's very challenging for most people because when they see the core emotion wheel, they're like, oh, why is there only one good emotion and all the rest are bad? Instead of realizing they're neither good nor bad. And so you were explaining how joy is not necessarily what we consider a good or how we label it.
And we just talked about it in the presentation that all of us have done dumb things. We've made bad choices, bad decisions, bad behavior out of joy. This is true for everybody.
Right.
We've all bought something. We should have never bought that, but we were flooded with joy in the moment, so we bought it, whether it's a car or a house or a smaller item. And then we regret that. We call it buyer's remorse. Because we realized, well, that was a dumb purchase. I should have never bought that. And then I just shared, which we do if we have enough time with the group, we get to the relationship science, psychological disorders, and that I personally deal with a number of psychological disorders. And again, a psychological disorder is just where your nervous system gets dysregulated, your psyche gets disordered, which we then, unfortunately, in the psychology world, pathologize and call it a psychological disorder. To which people go, oh my goodness, done, put him in an institution, put him in a straitjacket. No, his psyche is just disordered. So that happens for me in various areas. And so then I talked about a few things. One of those is kleptomania. I feel a lot of joy about stealing stuff. I just love it. It's just, and I can remember early childhood, and I don't know when it started, how it started, why it started. That's why we don't ask why, because we can't figure out why. Of course, this crowd that we're speaking to, I can tell people are getting a little bit nervous, like, oh my gosh, who is this
thief on our hands?
Thief, we thought this was Dr.
I don't know. I didn't experience. I just could hear the giggle. It was like all of a sudden there was this wave of giggles that was happening in the audience. So I get it that for you, you're thinking they're perhaps judging you, but I was experiencing it as people just starting the giggle.
So I actually want to play this clip. So everyone listening, y'all can actually hear what was being said and how this played out. So here's the clip.
And I'll share this too real quickly. I know we're out of time. Yeah. But I deal with a fairly high level of kleptomania. I love stealing stuff. It's a joy experience for me. I've had this since I was a kid. I would steal stuff and go throw it in the dumpster outside, literally. I love the idea of getting to steal stuff. I don't do it, okay? Don't judge me, you wretched people. But I mean, it's regular. It's numerous times a week that we're somewhere, and I'm like, babe, you see that thing? I bet I could steal that. I bet I could take that home. I feel so much joy about that. And she oos me. She's like, yeah, I hear you. And then she asked me the fourth phrase. She goes, what do you need? I'm like, I need to steal it. She's like, nope, we're not stealing that. I'm like, really? They wouldn't even notice. She's like, I know, but you are not stealing that. I'm like, yeah. So again, is joy bad? No, it's just what I experience. I just love the idea. I mean, we were at Elijah and Christine's the other day. There were like 6 items. I was like, I bet I could take that. And don't tell them about that, but I'm like, they would either never notice, or if they did notice, they'd never think to accuse me. So there's total safety. So, and I didn't steal anything from him. But
I do allow him to steal sugar packets from like Starbucks, but that's about it.
yeah.
So he has a backpack full of sugar packets. And pockets. Do you have pockets? Yep. Is that promoted?
Call the cops.
Where did you get those?
I'm not telling.
Need to refill the sugar.
Refill the sugar, right? Caught red-handed. Oh my God.
Oh, wow. All right.
I'm not saying it's healthy. I'm just saying it is. That's what happens for me.
Enjoy your lunch. See you.
So that's.
I died
How that
laughing when
played
I
out.
watched that
Oh my
the first
We've
time.
watched it about 8 times.
Oh
and
my goodness.
Laughed
Yeah.
so hard because if you're not watching on YouTube or on Spotify, what you couldn't see in that moment was Glenn was pulling out sugar packets from his pocket that he had just taken, I don't know, an hour before.
From the coffee station that was part of the event.
Yes.
Like they had it was a beautiful, coffee and all the options and tea. And so when he did that, I mean, we both just lost it. And of course, I knew immediately where he'd gotten them from.
Right.
And so I'm pointing over to the area where the coffee is. And then I'm telling Elijah, I think you're going to have to, restock
Yes,
the sugar before the
yes.
next break.
Yeah, and I've shared it before, and I mean, if you watch much of our stuff, I don't care anymore. It helps that I'm old, but this is one of my many pet peeves is that what we do in our culture is that the leader, whatever the setting is, whether it's a church, a business, whatever, is we've established this thing that the leader is supposed to be fill in the blank, perfect,
Right.
untouchable, is supposed to have it all together. And as we were saying before, certainly not a fellow pilgrim on the journey. And if we could shift this, so that's part of our whole positioning, that people understand that we're just pilgrims on the journey. Do we do better in some areas than other people? Yeah, we do. Do we do worse in some areas than other people? Yes, we do. And it was fascinating to me over the next day or so with this group in Santa Rosa, how many people came up to me, number one, and said, oh, I deal with that same thing. That happens for me. Because again, they never shared that with anybody ever, because you just don't do that. You don't say, I feel joy about stealing stuff. Well, now we have to, I don't know, imprison the guy or, just keep him away from everything.
Watch him.
Sugar packets or something. And then how many people came up later who didn't necessarily struggle with that personally, but they're like, that's when I felt safe with you. That's when I knew that I could trust you. Because you're not speaking from a podium. You're not speaking from a pedestal. You're not saying, I have it all together. I'm perfect. I've arrived. And what's the matter with you people that you can't get your stuff together and be a good person? And just to recognize that, yeah, we all deal with stuff. We all get knocked off course. Again, any of the emotions that push us to where we don't want to be. And that's part of the human condition, part of the human experience, part of the human journey, is just processing through and figuring out, oh, okay, I get hit with joy there, and that pushes me to somewhere to make a poor decision. And again, it could be fear, it could be loneliness, it could be shame, whatever. And this is the power of the connection codes. It's just unwrapping the emotions and going, what's happening for me there? What's happening for me? What's happening for me? Oh, I really want to steal that thing. And you process it with a friend. I process it with Phyllis, and she gets to the fourth phrase. She says, what do you need? And I'm like, I need to steal that. And she goes, well, we're not doing that.
Right.
but I get that that's what's happening for you.
Well, oh, go ahead.
Well, often, with situations like that, that especially at different seasons in your life, you hide that
Mm-hmm.
because it's not acceptable in our society to steal things.
Right.
And so and yet it's such a joy push. And then you go, but I can't let anyone on. No one can know this about me. And in that secrecy, it gains power.
Oh my goodness,
Yeah.
yes.
In that secrecy, it becomes obsessive. In that secrecy, it becomes dangerous.
Right.
And what was fascinating to me is that the people that came up and talked to us about it over the, we were kind of halfway through, I think, the weekend. So we had many more touch points with people. And it was interesting. This was that morning because we went to lunch. We had a lunch break and we went to lunch with a couple who they were so precious because we sat down and they said, we want you to know we actually felt a lot of fear about having lunch with you, just, not sure what to talk about, just intimidated or, whatever. And she said, it was incredible when Glenn shared that. It just changed everything for us. And then her husband spoke up and he goes, yeah, because that's what I deal with. And yet they were, as a couple, very much open with each other about it. And so it was very similar to how we engage in it, where he'll say to her, oh man, you know how easy it'd be to walk out of the store with that or the restaurant with that. And she grins and she acknowledges what he says. And then she goes, but we're not going to do that. And he goes, oh, no. And so we had, it bonded us to this couple who that early that morning were like, oh, we said we would go to lunch with them, and they're on staff there at the church. And so they were wanted to do it, but yet fear of that, the intimacy of just the four of us being out to lunch. And when Glenn shares about emotion, he doesn't usually share that particular story. And so I was fascinated. I mean, I was surprised that he went down that road.
Right.
And yet it was such a beautiful connector to that couple that we went to lunch with. And then others who came up over the weekend and shared similar stories. And then I was so surprised how many people brought up the Home Alone clip where they're on the plane and I don't know, the uncle.
Yes, Uncle Frank.
Uncle Frank.
Put it in your purse.
Put it in your purse. Put it in your purse. And so many people, several brought that one up, that clip. And of course, Glenn knew that clip. He knows movies and he knew that clip. And then it was such a funny, he goes, how often do you say, put it in your purse, put it in your purse? And it's just oh my goodness, that is so funny.
Right.
That is so many people's joy points.
Yeah.
But as a society, it is so looked down upon. We don't know what to do with it.
Right.
So we don't process it even in the joy. We judge it.
Right.
And we label it.
Yeah.
And then, and if you're not in relationships where you're safe, then you're hiding it.
Right.
Which then it can really become such a problem in your life.
And also specifically about this particular idea of stealing and taking things, some people do it out of fear. It's not necessarily a joy point, but it's a fear point. They're taking things. And as someone, I have actually been robbed, I think, higher than the average person. It's very strange. We've had lots of things stolen from us even before Wes and I were married. As a kid, someone broke into our home in the middle of the night and took all of our things. And so as someone who's been stolen from a lot, I think those people were doing it, some maybe out of joy, but also out of fear. But I think that so often, whatever emotion is driving us to do something that's unacceptable, you're right, we hide it, and then it grows and it festers, and then it actually leads us more likely to do the action. Yeah. But what I loved about the story was the fact that when you let yourself to vulnerability, when you opened yourself up, how connecting that was for other people.
Yeah.
Because we've created a society around perfection. We've created a society of my kids all stand in a row and we act proper and we do our thing. And I always have my hair done and we all look perfect all the time.
Yeah.
And so anytime someone opens their mouth to share something real, to share something vulnerable, we're all like, whoa, that actually just happened. And it can draw us to them, Or we could stand back in judgment of be like, I don't even know what to do with this information.
Yeah.
You know, it's so interesting that you say that because, and I know that I think we're all smart enough to know that what people put on Instagram or Facebook isn't necessarily what's really happening in their lives. So I think we all know that, but
We know it in our brains,
Right.
but it's
In your
still,
psyche, it
oh
still
my
affects you.
goodness, it affects us so
it does.
deeply.
It really does. And I just being amongst a lot of people in the past week and hearing so many people share loneliness. It's like, oh man, how many of us are just feeling loneliness.
Yeah.
And then it's interesting to me because what I thought about is, wow, when I follow you on Instagram, I don't see that.
Yeah.
You're with great people and you're traveling and you're doing so many fun things and you're taking all these pictures with people. And yet here we are really being vulnerable and I'm hearing how lonely you are.
Yeah.
And it's just a good reminder. And I know for me, sometimes when I see all of that, then it almost triggers when I see people's Instagram posts that are just like full of smiling friends. I'm like, man, I wish I had that.
Well,
And so it is often not a reality of what's even happening in that person's life.
Right.
Because you can snap a picture where everyone looks good and they're smiling. That doesn't mean that we're not lonely. And I think that it's like we think smiling and acting like everything is okay is what is expected. And yet it's so damaging because when we can actually open up and say, even in a crowd of people, man, I'm feeling really lonely.
Yeah.
It's real. It's what's happening. And then
Yeah.
we're releasing that from our bodies.
And I don't know if this has gotten worse. Maybe it's just been consistent for centuries. I'm not sure. But there's such a push now, certainly in our faith-based communities, but also in the secular perspective, that you need to focus on the positive. You need to, I remember years back there was the, what people say, how you doing? They go, blessed and highly favored. And so that's what you're supposed to do. You name it and claim it. You speak it into existence, which is bizarre because we would never say that to a 12-month-old. We would never say that to an 18-month-old, who cries, and we go, stop focusing on the negative. Stop, you're defeating yourself. Well, that doesn't make any sense. Well, there's no birthday where that changes. Where now you're 3, now you're 8, now you're 11, now you're 15. And you need to stop being real. You need to stop being human. Well, that doesn't work. It's just not human. That's not how we're designed.
But it is interesting you say that we don't do that to babies or toddlers. And yet I think we do at times. We say, stop crying, stop crying, stop crying.
Yeah. You're okay. You're okay. You're okay.
But if we realize that their crying is them expressing a need, they just don't have the words to say the need. And that it's the language of our birth is to say, I have a need.
Right.
And for us to tune in to the need. And so from a really young age, we're told, stop crying, stop crying, stop crying. And eventually, whatever age, we get the message, stop crying.
And ultimately what that does is it teaches us not to be vulnerable.
Absolutely.
Like we are teaching our kids right now, don't be vulnerable with me. Don't share with me because I don't know. I can't handle it myself because I'm dysregulated. I am off kilter. And I love that you brought up loneliness just now because a part of the feedback that you received, Glenn, and sharing that joy that you have is that people came up and they were like, I experienced that too. I thought that I was the only one. I didn't know that other people experienced that. I feel safe with you now because you shared this with me. And so we walk around feeling so lonely because we are not willing to be, or because we're so afraid. No, because we were trained at an early age not to be vulnerable. And so therefore we stop being vulnerable. And now we've built these walls up and we feel alone because we can't share, I'm struggling with this, or I find joy in this, or I have fear in this. So we feel alone all the time.
Yeah. And the leaders in those situations, whether it's the parents, the pastors, the business leaders, think that their people are doing great. Because it's like, see, Tira never experiences that thing anymore. No, she still experiences it. She just doesn't share about it because I conveyed to her clearly that she's bad and wrong. We always say that when we tell people, what? No, you don't need to feel that. The message they get is, number one, you're wrong to experience that. Number two, you're stupid. And so we're telling people all the time, you're wrong and you're stupid. And then we think we help them. And all they got, the message, the takeaway they got was, don't share with Glenn again. And then Glenn walks away going, man, I helped Tira so much. She's never struggled with that again. It's amazing. It's not that she never struggled with it again. She just never shared it with me again. And maybe she never shared it with anybody. And that's the incredible travesty of it and tragedy, is that we're just shutting people down and we think we're doing good. And from a good heart, good intention, but we are damaging people so much.
We were talking about this the other night with this group about how even just we shut each other down with crying. It's like we have, for different reasons, this thought of, we shouldn't, number one, we shouldn't cry. Number two, I look ridiculous when I cry. So we have a judgment on it. And, he doesn't want to hear me. He doesn't like it when I cry. So again, we shut ourselves down. And, now we actually have studies now that say hormones are in tears. And if we don't let the tears flow and we're holding back, then we end up with a hormonal imbalance because our body is trying to release the hormones and we're saying, no. And, and I think, wow, it's fascinating. Of course, we were talking about all the way back to an early age, and a phrase that Glenn heard. And then this group was talking about this as they were leaving, that the saying, stop crying or I'll give you something to cry about.
Oh, you heard that growing up.
Yeah. And just the thought of, oh my goodness, it is so opposite of what we actually need. And to be able to have people tune into us and when we do feel the urge to cry. And I think I've heard people say, well, I can't, I feel like if I start crying, I'll never stop.
Right.
And so even that, it's like you're resisting your own body's desire to release the tears that are full of hormones. And this week, actually today, is the anniversary of my mom's passing.
Wow.
And 8 years ago, she passed away. And it is always leading up to this day. Like I've been thinking about it, every day for days and days now. And even, how Facebook pops a memory up that you didn't ask for, or your phone does. I don't know if it's even Facebook, but a picture. And that came up about a week ago because my mom, towards the end of her life, she had a stroke, and the doctor said she's got probably 72 hours. So we called, people in, and our oldest daughter, Echo, and her baby at the time, who was it was Haven, sorry, that flew in. And so there's this precious picture of them sitting next to my mom, and my brother is on the other side of my mom. And that picture popped up, and it's like, I don't even know what we were doing, but we were in California when it happened. And, it just takes my breath away. It's like that unexpected picture. And then yesterday we were traveling to get back home, and from California flying, and it's a pretty long day. And I had a moment, and I was checking Instagram, and a friend of mine had taken her mom to Maui for her mom's 80th. And so it was so many precious pictures. Well, it just washed over me, like the sadness of, wow, that's so beautiful. And it took me back to, the memories of, because my mom died when she was 90. So I was thinking about how many birthdays did I celebrate with my mom, and how many special things that I do. And then I thought, man, I never took my mom to Hawaii. And, we did a lot of other things and trips, but not that. And it just washed over me with sadness. And I think that society-wise, I think we're taught to not let that just flow. We hold ourselves back instead of just immediately sharing it with whoever is nearby. And, and sharing it, like with Glenn or even others, like over the past week when I've shared that with people, they've been so kind. And it's like they make space for my sad.
Yeah.
They don't try to fix it. They don't try to reassure me. They just make space for it. And it's not ever planned.
Yeah.
Even today's a busy day. I haven't like gone, hey, today I'm going to set aside all this time and I'm going to go look at pictures of my mom. I haven't planned that. But leading up to today, I've had several moments that were just really big. And it's like, wow, I was just washed over with that. And I know that even during that year that my mom was dying, I was resisting, pushing away the sad. Like, oh my word, I didn't want to feel it. And it really affected my body very, very
Right.
strongly, like
Yeah.
in a bad way. And Glenn at one point just was, Connection Codes was, he was in the research stage of it all. And he suggested, he goes, babe, I think you're experiencing sad. And I said, I don't have time to be sad. He goes, I'm not trying to suggest, it's just what's happening to you. So me resisting actually made it so much worse.
Right.
But
right.
I know now, and it took me a while, like I think it took me a couple of years to actually figure out. I resisted it so strongly because my dad died when I was 25. And when I got that phone call, my mind exploded.
Yeah.
Like, it was a physical, unbelievable pain that I had never had in my life. And I remember that day, that night. I can still visualize where I was standing when the phone rang. I can visualize the phone. I can visualize picking it up. And I can visualize it was like my heart was shattered and it hurt so bad. And I cried for a solid year. That's how I grieved the death of my dad. And so fast forward all these years later, many, many years later, my body and my brain was remembering that.
Right.
And I think I was resisting, going, I don't have time for that.
Yeah.
I don't want to do that again. And so it was almost like I didn't allow myself to grieve my mom because I was fighting so hard not to grieve my mom. And I even have sadness now over that. Like, wow, that is such a beautiful thing. And I fought it so hard because I had that idea of, if I start crying, I'll never stop.
Yeah.
And yet my body desperately needed to cry. Like, I wanted to sometimes pinch myself just to get a tear out.
Yeah.
And, it's interesting. We see scenes in movies at times that reminds us of people who go, I can't cry. And you just want to go, man, we need to cry.
Yeah.
Something has shut that down for us. And yet actually it's a bodily function we really need.
Yeah. And the sad side of the science side of it, the therapeutic side of it is the tears are supposed to release. The hormones are supposed to be washed out of the system. Well, we stop it. You now have a hormonal imbalance. And then we go, oh, well, you need a prescription to deal with your hormonal imbalance. It's like, well, sort of after the fact, but actually we just need this person to cry. The hormones get washed out.
Well, and I think too, often I talk to people who think they have to set aside a weekend to go cry instead of realizing, no, when it hits you, cry. Just like over the last week when that picture popped up, I just cried.
Yeah.
And then when I got on Instagram yesterday and I saw that she had taken her mom's 80th birthday to Hawaii, I just cried. Like, just do it in the moment. Don't plan it.
Right.
Don't think, well, I just need a whole weekend to go and just sit in it. It's like, cry in the moment. And if you're in a place where you can share it with someone, awesome. And if no one's there, just cry.
Yeah.
And talk about it later and share it with someone. Oh, man, I felt really sad earlier. Got this picture pop up on my phone so unexpectedly. And just to realize how much we need that.
Right.
So good.
Well, and the fact that you co-regulated with others, and so I think that's what this whole episode today is about. It's about not even just doing this process with your partner, but like really building that community, finding other couples that you can share these vulnerable moments, even moments that we may laugh about, but it's still a personal thing. It's still like, oh, I'm sharing this thing that is not accepted by society, but here's this part of me that now I can process this joy with you, or I can process this pain with you, or I can process this sad with you because it's what I'm experiencing right now. and you have more safe people in your life, because that's what we need.
Mhm.
We need a wall around us of safe people that we can all live life with and step out of our homes and like, no, oh, we have another couple friend. We have other people that we can talk to.
Yeah, and you say couples, which absolutely, totally, but for singles as well, you know,
100%.
10-year-olds, for teenagers, whoever,
Yeah.
that we all need safe people. Of course, we're on a global mission, 7 billion people, because we want everybody to be a connection coder, regardless of age, marital status, whatever, that they're just able to connection code with those around them all the time.
100%. So do y'all want to close us out by doing the wheel?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Do you want me to start?
Yeah. Well, do you want to do an issue specific about the Santa Rosa trip?
No, let's do it more
Okay.
general. You could do it
All
if
right.
you wanted to,
Okay.
but I was just having a lot, I guess, as we were talking about all this, you
Yeah.
know. So, yeah, I'll go first.
Okay.
Joy. I'll start with joy today. Just, you know, joy of being home, but also
Wow.
joy of just our trip and all the fun experiences we had and the wonderful people that we met. It was just such a great trip. So it's a double joy of being home, but joy of our California time. Sad, definitely today is a sad day, and just miss my mom. And
Yeah.
thinking about her a lot. And, you know, I'm thankful for that love. Like, I'm thankful that I'm actually experiencing sad after 8 years, you know?
Yeah.
Let's see. Lonely. I think that, I shared this with my daughter yesterday. Lonely in the fact that my 60th birthday is coming up, and I've been talking about it for a year, and I have not even invited people to my party. In my mind, I have,
Yeah.
and I want to really celebrate big, but the closer it gets, I'm like, oh, it's not worth the trouble. So feeling lonely, need to reach out and get people to help me make this party fun. Let's see. I think hurt. I think that I experienced hurt earlier, just when we were talking about an interaction with a person that now I think you've talked to me about it probably 5 or 6 times. And I know that I missed some things there, but I feel hurt when it's brought up so many times.
Wow.
Let's see. Anger. I think that for me, anger, the bigger picture of life is that we miss so terribly on the messaging that we give each other. And so we're not safe for each other. And there's so many lonely people all around us, and they don't know to say, wow, I'm just lonely.
Yeah.
So anger in that. Guilt. Definitely guilt when I miss with you, and just like what you were sharing with me in the car on the way over here today, just that if I had just told you my emotion yesterday that I was hit with fear, then we wouldn't have already had 5 or 6 conversations about this. So feel guilt about that. Shame. I think the shame is kind of associated even with the lonely, that I don't just ask for help,
Yeah.
and that I don't feel worthy of getting help or worthy of a big birthday party. I don't want to bother anybody.
Yeah.
So it's how I feel about myself. Let's see. Did I get them all? Okay. Your turn.
I'm always startled. You know, of course, I always have learned more about you in the last 2 to 3 years than all the other years combined. I always feel so much sadness because I view you as so spectacular. Does this count as part of my 2 minutes? The crying part. There should be an exception. But I just feel sadness. I'm like, dang, what happened for this woman, you know, throughout her life that, you know, she doesn't feel worthy, valued enough, that she is significant enough to do this. Some anger in that, certainly things that I've missed with you so many, many, many times, things that I think your parents missed with you and instilled this deep inside of you, and so many other people. So a lot of anger in that. It's like, dang, how do we miss this so horribly culturally, but how do we miss it with you? Because you deserve, you know, it's just so much. I get hit with fear and that sometimes, just because I think, dang, I gotta, and I guess there's shame in that for me too. Like, I gotta step up here and figure out how to just manage time. I just run from one thing to the next, and I'm always doing what's right in front of me, the urgent thing, and then I miss some of the more important things. Let's see, so much joy, certainly around you, about traveling with you. Oh my gosh, the California trip was so spectacular.
I forgot to ooh. I just realized I've held my breath. I've held my breath the whole time. Okay, crying and oohing is a little more challenging.
Yes. Just a lot of joy in the trip. I mean, some amazing contacts were made. I think I already said fear, but a little bit of fear going into the event the other night, because there were some pretty high-powered people there, and I just didn't know how they would react. And of course, it ended up spectacular, which is great. May have said guilt. I don't remember, but just guilt that I missed stuff with you, because you, of all people in my life, deserve my connection code's perfection. Loneliness in that too, just not knowing how to manage stuff and plan the important things in life. I think I completely lost, but I think that's close to 8. It's most of the wheel.
Man, thank you so much I say it every week. Thank you for sharing. It's so connecting. If this is your first time listening and you're like, what did they just do? This is the core emotion wheel, and it's a huge part of the connection codes journey. It's something, there are rules to it. There were very specific things that Dr. Glenn and Phyllis did just then that you can't see, but are a part of how you do this correctly to connect.
Right.
And so if you would like to know more, like, oh man, I need this kind of connection, you can go to our website, connectioncodes.co, and download our core emotion wheel with the instructions on how to do this with your partner, with a safe person in your life to experience this connection. And I will say that I shared this before with my 5-year-old last night. We were really having a rough night, struggling deeply. And we sat down together and did the wheel. And he, as soon as I mentioned it, his entire demeanor changed. I said, do you want to do the wheel? He went from screaming and crying to jumping up. Yes, grabbed it. And I found out things about his day I had no idea had happened to this little 5-year-old body. And it made so much sense. So when we do this together, we learn so much about each other. So again, connectioncodes.co to download the core emotion wheel and find out more of what this connection codes journey looks like and how to live in deep connection and share vulnerably within a community of people with like overcoming conflict. That's the part of it that just takes it over, that we can not just experience conflict, but we can overcome it quickly together.
Yeah, and I just want to interject, everybody, because there's a lot of connection coders listening, share this with 5 people, like literally right now. Just go, my mom needs this, my neighbor needs this, my cousin, and you're the one. You're the one that will reach them. Phyllis and I never will. And the way this spreads is by you going, oh, I could share this. It's so incredibly simple. It's very complex because it's based on humans, but it's incredibly simple. It's incredibly doable. And I just encourage you right now, literally in this moment, to share it with a bunch of people.
Because we hear from a lot of connection coders that have gone through our master classes, that have read the book, and this is where they learn the life application. And we hear all the time, like, this needs to explode. This needs to explode. And it's going to grow because you share it. That's it. That's how it grows. There are 3 of us. We're doing the best we can, but we really need you. And this week, someone emailed that's a podcast listener, and I closed the email. I was like, thank you for being on our team. And I really thought about that. I view our listeners like we are the core team, but the people that are connection coders, like y'all are on this team with us. And so we just so appreciate y'all being here, whether you're listening or watching. And let's close it out.
Cool. Well, and again, the reason we stress this so much is because you need this.
And you deserve this.
So let's do this.
Let's do this.